Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to listen again. Today I'm going to work through a question. The question is, did Jesus violate the Sabbath? In Matthew 12, we see the text that is relevant to this topic. It says, "At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry. They began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they looked and said to him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.' He said to them, 'Have you not read what David did when he was hungry and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" Okay, so my argument is this. Jesus did not violate the Sabbath. Because the Torah itself gives us an example of what defines work. We read in Numbers 15 where a man is found working and he is taken and the death penalty is executed on him. Numbers 15:32 says, "While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been made clear what should be done to him. And the Lord said to Moses, 'The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp.' And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as the Lord commanded Moses." Okay, so an example of what is considered violating the Sabbath is this man. Okay, he's outside, he's working, he's laboring, he's trying to get work done. He's gathering sticks on the Sabbath. This is a clear violation. The Sabbath day was to be holy, it was to be a day of rest. This man is violating it. Now, on the contrary, can the same be said about Jesus and his disciples? Well, no. Because what law forbade Jesus or a Jew to simply walk in a grain field and if they were hungry to pick a few heads of grain and eat? What law forbade that? I argue that there is not a law that forbids that. Next is Jesus' argument here by appealing to something David did that the Pharisees would not have condemned. Okay, so he's making an argument challenging the Pharisees to be consistent. Okay, so in 1 Samuel 12 verse 6, we see a text where David has people with him, just like Jesus. It's a parallel account. And David, he goes into the temple and he gets the bread of the presence. Sorry, it wouldn't have been the temple then because the temple wasn't made yet, but into where the priest had the showbread and they were doing their priestly duties. David came in and he got bread, and him and the people with him ate bread, and it was on the Sabbath day. Was David taken outside and stoned for breaking the Sabbath? No, nor should he have been. Okay, so Jesus is saying, look, if you condemn me for what I'm doing here, then you also have to condemn David, which they would not have done because they highly esteemed David. Okay. Next, the next point is this: some people under the Mosaic Law, they would, in a sense, do work. They would do things on the Sabbath day, yet they would not be considered as liable for violating the Sabbath. In other words, it ultimately wasn't considered as work on the Sabbath day because of this, because of the role that they had. I'll give you an example. With the priest, let's read an example of a priestly duty on the Sabbath day in Numbers 28, verse 9. This is something that the Levitical priest would do on the Sabbath day. Okay, this is a type of offering that the priest would have to offer up on the Sabbath day. Leviticus 28, verse 9. On the Sabbath day, 2 male lambs, a year old without blemish, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering, mixed with oil in its drink offering. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, besides the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. So the priest would technically do things on the Sabbath, but because of their unique role under the Mosaic Law, they weren't considered as guilty of breaking. Okay, so it could also be said that even if you wanted to say Jesus is somehow doing something on the Sabbath that in a sense could be considered work or something like that, as Jesus is God in the flesh, as Jesus shares the being of Yahweh. Psalm 104 says that Yahweh, he's constantly upholding the universe perpetually, even on the Sabbath. So it could be said in some sense that Yahweh does things on the Sabbath day. Let's read a few verses in Psalm 104 to give our justification for this. So Psalm 104, let's start in verse 10. It's talking about God. You make springs gush forth in the valleys. Does he do that even on the Sabbath? I would argue yes. They flow between the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Besides them, the birds of the heavens dwell. They sing among the branches. From your lofty abode, you water the mountains. Does God water the mountains even on the Sabbath? I would argue he does. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. Verse 14. God causes the grass to grow for the livestock. Does grass grow on the Sabbath? Yes. Is God causing that grass to grow? Yes. Is God, in a sense, doing something on the Sabbath day without being guilty of breaking it himself? Yes. And plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. I can go on, but there a few verses there would be sufficient to argue that as Jesus is God in the flesh, even if he's doing things on the Sabbath, he's not considered guilty of breaking it because of his role, just like the priest had some things that they would do on the Sabbath without being considered guilty of breaking it. Another point would be to say is this. The Jews under the Mosaic Law at Jesus' time, there were some things that they would necessarily do on the Sabbath. Now, if you wanted to further define, to go beyond the parameters of the definition that the Mosaic Law gives of what constitutes work, okay, really anything can be considered as working on the Sabbath. Here's an example. On the 8th day, when an Israelite son is born, the 8th day of his life, he's required to be circumcised, okay? Now, my question is this. What if he's born on a Friday, okay? 8 days from Friday is the following Shabbat, okay? Is going and circumcising your child work on the Sabbath? It has to be done on the 8th day. If that falls on the Sabbath, that is something that has to be done that falls on the Sabbath day. So, for those who would try to go beyond the parameters of the Torah and argue for sort of a binding Mishnaic understanding and definition of what constitutes work on the Sabbath, you end up running into problems because some things are just necessary to be done on the Sabbath, but it's not considered violating the Sabbath. Ultimately this, Jesus and his disciples were simply hungry. They wanted to eat food. They needed food to eat. Even in the Mishnah, you can read in the section on Shabbat that it's stated over and over and over again that the Sabbath can be broken in order to save life. Okay, the Sabbath can be overruled in order to save life, and Jesus talks about this a lot with his engagement with the Pharisees and other contexts that we won't look at right now. And so Jesus appeals to the text in the prophets. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He says, if you would have known what this means, you would have not condemned the guiltless. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. If you have any questions, any comments, I always welcome questions and comments for further discussion. Thank you so much for listening.